Hi, everybody. I'm Connie Joe with Soul Navigation. And today I want to take a look at medical astrology in the natal chart. Now, I want to say right away that medical astrology is not a substitute for your doctor or going to your regular practitioner or herbal doctor, whatever you prefer, but it can give you clues and a roadmap to why some things happen in our health and why some things happen consistently in our health. I had a really good reason for really digging into medical astrology. I love all astrology and I've always been interested in medical astrology. I don't claim to be an expert, but for the last several years, Uranus has been going through my sixth house of health. And I'm usually a very private person, but I wanted to share some of the things that have happened to me with you. I'm not on social media. I truly am very private. But since Uranus has been going through my sixth house of health, some really weird things have happened to me. So, one of the things that happened that I noticed almost immediately was this anxiety, this nervous energy that I don't usually have, that started really happening as Uranus went into my sixth house. And it's also the house of our everyday routine. So it seemed like every day I had this anxiety that I didn't understand. So, secondly, I started to lose my hair. And I don't know if you guys remember, probably not, but at the Seattle workshop this year, I wore my hair in a ponytail almost the entire time, or I wore a hat because I had a huge bald spot in the back of my head. And when I say huge, I mean it was about as big as my fist. And it was caused by an autoimmune condition brought on by stress. And since then, I'm going to give a shout out to Dr. Barusco in Daytona Beach, Florida. He actually gave me injections in the bald spots. I had several. I had the one in the back of my head, I had one here, I had one here, I had one here. And miraculously, my hair has grown back. He is an absolute fantastic person. His entire staff is fantastic. And no, this is not a commercial. I really think this highly of this doctor and his kindness and the fact that I have my hair back again. It's even growing back in the bald spot in the back. So that was one thing. And I also felt like that was a lesson for me in how to handle stress. And then the entire month of August, I was sick with what started out as an infection in my tooth. It went all the way through my jaw, all the way into my neck. I ended up having to have oral surgery and have the tooth cut out and the infection cut out. It was, yeah, I know that's gross. But I guess I'm saying all this because medical astrology is real. And since Uranus has been traveling my sixth house of health, I really started to pay more attention to it. So I want to get into it in depth with you. I want to go through every sign and what part of the body each sign rules, and also how the planets come into play. So you're going to need to know your house rulers for medical astrology, and I'm going to go through those quickly with you. So write these down. You especially need to know the ruler of your ascendant, your rising sign. You need to know the ruler of your sixth house of health, and also your 12th house of mental health and spiritual health. Just quickly, Aries is ruled by Mars, Taurus is ruled by Venus, Gemini is ruled by Mercury, Cancer is ruled by the moon, Leo is ruled by the sun, Virgo is ruled by Mercury, Libra is ruled by Venus, and Scorpio is co-ruled by both Pluto and Mars. Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter. Oh, goodness. Capricorn is ruled by Saturn. Aquarius is co-ruled by Uranus and Saturn. And then finally, I said Aquarius. Okay, Pisces It is co-ruled by Neptune and Jupiter. So write those down because the house rulers really count in medical astrology. So let's get into what parts of the body that each sign rules. Because let's say I'm a natal Capricorn. I have a couple of planets in Capricorn, and it rules the teeth, the mouth, right? And you'll also notice as I go through these that it goes down. It's like Aries rules the head, it rules the eyes, and then it goes all the way down to our feet, which is ruled by Pisces. I'm going to get more in depth. But you'll notice that if you have a plethora of planets in one of these signs, that this might be an area of your health to really pay special attention to. Okay, so the ascendant or rising sign rules the physical body. The first house is us, it's all about us, that first house. But the actual ascendant rules our body. So, for instance, my natal ascendant is Sagittarius. So, the ruler of my ascendant is Jupiter. So, that's very important in my health. And ironically, part of the time I was going through some of these issues, Jupiter was also in my sixth house. All right. Also, we want to find the ruler of your sixth house of health and everyday routine, because this is how we feel day to day on a consistent basis. And then the 12th house, which rules our mental health. So you need to know the ruler, especially of these three houses. Keep that in mind. All right. What does Aries rule? You know what? I don't have these memorized, so I am going to use my notes some. Like I said, medical astrology is not new to me, but I really just started digging in to medical astrology. Thank you, Lucy, for coming across the screen and showing us your lovely Taurus self. All right, so Aries rules the head, the face, the brain, the eyes, headaches, migraines, eye conditions. So all of these are ruled by Aries. Now, if we think about the ruler of Aries, it's Mars, the fiery planet. So Mars rules surgery. It's cutting. So in ancient astrology, Mars ruled sharp objects, cutting. It also rules the blood. Isn't that interesting? So when you're looking at medical astrology, or especially if you're electional astrology, you want to look at Mars if you're going to have surgery done and make sure it's not making any adverse aspects transiting Mars to your natal Mars, and that none of the malefic planets are making aspects to your natal Mars. It's very important in medical astrology. Okay, so Mars rules several things. It rules fevers. Doesn't that make sense? Inflammation. If you find that you have inflammation in your body, you might want to look and see what Mars is doing. Here's another thing: accidents, injuries. Now, this is really interesting to me because you put a Uranus and Mars together. It's a time period, if this is making a transit in your chart or transiting by progression, whatever it might be, you really want to be careful at this time period because Mars and Uranus together, that can be a sudden accident. All right, so we're going to look at Taurus. What does the sign of Taurus rule? It rules the neck, the shoulders, the throat, the vocal cords. So if you have sore throats, a stiff neck, or even thyroid issues, you might want to look and see what Taurus is doing in your chart, where it's at, what's going on, what's transiting the sign of Taurus. As in my case, it was Uranus. But people that have amazing singing voices often have planets in Taurus because it rules the vocal cords. Taurus is ruled by Venus, and if your ascendant, sixth house or 12th house is Taurus or Libra, you want to see what Venus is doing in transits and also in your progressed chart. All right, Gemini. Gemini rules the lungs. Isn't that interesting? Do you know? I'm not sure I knew that. I did know that Gemini rules the hands and the arms. It also rules the fingers and our nervous system. So oftentimes people that have a stellium in Gemini, they might have an excess nervous energy. They may also be very dexterous, able to use their fingers, play the guitar, play the piano, work with their hands, all of those things. It's actually not just the planet of communication when you look at Gemini and the ruler Mercury. So this is interesting because people that do have a lot of Virgo or Gemini energy ruled by Mercury might have nervous problems, just have a lot of restless energy. It is also linked to communication. Of course, if there's issues in your speech, you might want to look and see what's going on in Gemini, or you might also want to look and see what's going on with Mercury. Also, your senses. Isn't this interesting? Our perception of things, our senses. I love that. And also our respiratory system. So these are all ruled by the sign of Gemini. And I don't think that all people that have a lot of Gemini have problems with the lungs, but it is something that you may want to pay more attention to if you have a stellium in the sign of Gemini. Okay, let's look and see what Cancer rules. Now, Cancer is really interesting to me because you can look at the symbol for Cancer and it kind of looks like a 69, but actually it's the breast. It's the human breast that it rules. And so it does rule the chest, the breast, the stomach, the digestive system. This would be where emotional eating might come in because it's ruled by the moon. Breast issues may come into play with Cancer, digestive problems. And that kind of goes with emotional eating. Now, this doesn't mean if you have a lot of planets in Cancer that you're going to have any of these problems, but it is something that you want to look for. Now, because the moon, I want everybody to think about this. The ruler of Cancer is the moon, and the moon rules the water, the tides. It's like when we've had the worst hurricanes here in Florida, it's been on a full moon. And that is another reason why we should never have surgery around a full moon or on a full moon because you actually bleed more. Isn't that interesting? But that if I'm doing electional astrology for someone, I never want them to plan a surgery if they can help it on a full moon. So this would be issues like edema, swelling, it's fluid. It's also our emotional stability. So let's say you have Cancer ruling your 12th house of mental health. You may be more emotional. I'm not saying you're mentally ill. I'm just saying that you may have more emotional ups and downs than some people, or you may be very sensitive and empathic with that position as well. So all of these things work several different ways. So for Cancer, you really want to look at mood swings, maybe anxiety, depression, water retention is the big one. So if you put Mars and the moon together and you have that swelling from Mars, the inflammation, and then the moon, which can be water retention. These are things that you might want to look at if they're affecting your chart ruler, your ascendant ruler, or the ruler of your sixth house. So all of this works together in a very cohesive way. And I know it might sound a little bit complicated to some of you, if you need help, I'd love to give you a medical astrology reading and do the very best I can with that. Like I said, no substitute for your doctor there, but you can find a link for me in the notes below or go to soulnavigation.com. Okay, enough of that. But what I'm saying is it all works together in this very cohesive way that you can actually look at your chart or progress chart or the transits going through and see the symptoms or see what might be going on in your body. It's really cool. So, just one more thing about the moon, and this is primarily for women, but, and I'll use myself as an example. I'm ruled by Jupiter, my ascendant, but my moon is in the first house. That also really affects me. And I know that water retention and menstrual cycles were difficult. So that's another thing that you can use the moon for, where it's located, if it's close to Mars, to see if maybe that's a reason why your menstrual cycles are really easy or really difficult. And you would also use the moon in medical astrology to possibly look for pregnancy as well. So the moon and Cancer are really heavy hitters when it comes to medical astrology. So let's look at the sign of Leo. And this one is so interesting to me. Of course, Leo is ruled by the sun, but it rules the heart. Now, it rules other things. I'm going to get there, but ruling the heart, I think both in our feelings, my heart, my soul, and also, of course, the literal physical heart itself. Also, it rules the spine, the upper back, and it would also be the sign you would look for high blood pressure, heart conditions. And having a lot of planets in Leo doesn't necessarily mean you'll have a heart condition or a spine condition, but it could mean that you really need to watch your blood pressure a lot more if you have a lot of planets in Leo. Also, the sun, the ruler, is a signifier of our overall health. It's like you walk out, say it's a rainy day, you walk out into the sun, and all of a sudden everything feels lighter and cleaner and warmer. And so the sun can be a good way to look at your overall health as well. Very interesting, the sun of Leo and the heart, but also one of my favorites. Also, the upper spine, so just behind the heart, that area of the back. If it's almost like if you're carrying too many heavy burdens, and I think this is a good analogy. Either physically doing too much with your back or carrying too much emotionally, that you can have problems in that area where you just feel that anxious feeling where you need to put your shoulders back and make your back straight, that kind of thing. So that's really the sun and the sign of Leo in medical astrology. So let's take a look at Virgo, ruled by Mercury. And just remember, a lot of people that have planets in Virgo, many planets in Virgo, or Mercury is very prominent in their chart, they may have that kind of restless, nervous energy because it's almost like their brain doesn't stop. They're always thinking about everything. And I think that's interesting because that can bring on some of that nervous, anxious energy sometimes. But Virgo also rules the digestive tract. Now, this makes sense to me because when I'm nervous, it affects my stomach, the digestive tract. Also, it rules the abdomen, the intestines, the spleen, and this could be food sensitivities, indigestion. It could be bloating, like and gastro issues. All of these things are related to the sign of Virgo. But the nervousness that Mercury can bring, I think, can bring some of those problems into the stomach as well, especially if we're holding in emotions, not letting go of things the way we need to. And sometimes Virgo will do that because Virgo, they're harder on themselves than anybody else is. They want things to be right. And I think that can cause some of these issues that might appear in the digestive tract or in the nervous system as well. But let's look closer at Mercury. Respiratory, the nervous system, of course, it's linked to our communication and the senses as well. I think I talked about this a little bit when we were talking about Gemini, but with Virgo, the nervous energy is a little bit different than it is with Gemini. So just something to think about if you have a lot of planets in Virgo, that could be, again, eating disorders or allergies to food, even, or issues with your digestive system. All right, now let's move on to Libra, ruled by Venus. Okay, again, this gets really fun because Libra is about one of the things Libra is about and Venus is about is beauty. So Libra and Venus rule of the skin, how we look, our features. Now, of course, the face is ruled and the head is ruled by Aries, but Libra rules that beauty. Venus rules the beauty part. Also, reproductive system. So if your Venus is in good condition, it might be easier to get pregnant or to get someone pregnant, by the way. But it rules the kidneys, our lumbar or lower back region, and also our buttocks. Okay, so if you have a nice ass, it could be because you have a lot of planets in Libra or Venus as well aspected. So the conditions that can come along with this, kidney pain, bladder pain, even lower back pain. I would even wonder if cramps during your menstrual period are somewhat related to Libra as well. Also, somewhat, it's medical astrology is like all astrology. There's like these different things that contrast each other. And although Capricorn does rule the skeletal system and the skin, I'm going to get to that in a moment. Libra also rules the skin, that beauty that we get from having beautiful skin. So if you have acne or skin conditions, sometimes Libra can be the culprit or the transits that are going through Libra at that time. So again, just something to be aware of and to look at. And also that lower back region is Libra related as well. And now we go to Scorpio. Okay, so this is our reproductive system. It's the sexual organs and the excretory system. And I think everybody knows what I mean by that. When we go to the bathroom, we eliminate everything, or we hope to eliminate things in the bathroom. And Scorpio is kind of like that if you think about it, because it is about regeneration, getting rid of the old or the waste so we can rise up like the phoenix, so we can become something better, something different. And so that's a lot of Pluto and Scorpio energy, but it also actually rules that system in our body, our bowels, and the urethra. So if you have problems, now this could be STDs, this could be any problems with the bladder, the bowels, UTIs. I would put that in the Scorpio category as well. And also orgasm. If you think about it, Scorpio rules the house of death, the eighth house, and orgasm is the little death, it's been called. So Scorpio also rules orgasm. Isn't that interesting? And again, this is ruled by Mars and Pluto, and we've already looked at Mars a little bit. But one thing I didn't say about Mars when we were back in Aries is Mars can also show when we are strong, when we have good physical strength and a good immune system. So Mars is not all bad. If it's well aspected or it's going through a really nice transit in progressions or in the natal chart, it can mean that we have more physical strength and our immune system is even better. So if it just depends on what it's doing, that's the reason you really have to pay attention to everything. It could be causing inflammation or it could be giving you physical strength as well. And then the co-ruler, Pluto, let's look at that. So Pluto rules regeneration, as I was saying, and elimination, reproduction. So one thing I want to say about Pluto, it rules the regeneration of cells. So if we have cells in our body that aren't growing correctly, or they quite frankly, I think Pluto is associated with cancer because that's when our cells are not growing normally, that they are out of control somehow. And I don't claim to be an expert on that, but I would definitely put the disease of cancer in that Scorpio Pluto category. It's also generational illnesses or our DNA because it rules that cellular growth. It could be an inherited disease that Pluto might bring into our life, or, and this could be good or bad. Like we might inherit really good genes as well as things that aren't so good with Pluto. This is also deep-seated infections. Pluto runs very deep. So this could be like an infection that is very hard to cure, very hard to get rid of. So Pluto rules some really serious issues in the system. But remember, Pluto's not all bad. It can also rule our good genetics. And when it eliminates things in our body that aren't good for us, that gives room for health to grow. So that's Scorpio, and that's Pluto and Mars, the rulers of Scorpio. One more thing about Scorpio is like obsessive compulsive disorder. This might be more related to the 12th house or hoarding, or, and I don't claim to be an expert, but these would be more in the mental health category, the ruler of the 12th house. Like if you had Scorpio on the 12th house cusp, something to look at. And this won't go for everybody for sure, but that would be one of the things that Pluto would be in charge of. Okay, so let's move on to Sagittarius. So the sign of Sagittarius actually rules the thighs, the hips, the liver, the pituitary, and it could be responsible for things like sciatica or where your hips are not even, and it causes those problems in your back. It would also be related to overindulgence. I'll tell you, when Jupiter is transiting the first house of us or the sixth house of health, this can be a time when you may overindulge, or it might be super easy to gain weight. There are some people out there that would like to gain weight. I'm not one of them, but if you want to gain weight when Jupiter's in the sixth or Jupiter is in the first, that's always a good time period. Also, it's just the opposite for Saturn, our planet of restriction. If you have Saturn transiting the first or the sixth, it may be easier to lose weight or restrict yourself a little bit more. So, Sagittarius, if you think about overindulgence, and either food or alcohol, any of those things, have nothing against food or alcohol at all, but that could affect the liver. And so that's all tied in with Sagittarius and the planet Jupiter. So a lot of times you'll find people that have a lot of Sagittarius, they may have very strong thighs or hips, or they may have issues with these as well. Just remember that Jupiter expands. So it's the planet of expansion, and usually whatever it touches, it expands in that area. So this can be super good, or it can be maybe not so good. Because if you already have something wrong, and I'm thinking back to my own hair loss, as Jupiter was going through my sixth house as well as Uranus, it seemed like it got worse. It expanded the condition. So that's just something to think about when we think about Jupiter. Although it is a benefic planet, and usually Jupiter means good things, occasionally think about event charts. If you have a fire, an event chart is a fire, and Jupiter comes in, sometimes the fire will go out of control. That's a good way to think about Jupiter. Okay, now let's move on to Capricorn, ruled by Saturn. So before we move on to Capricorn and Saturn, I do want to say again, if you see me looking down at my notes, It's because medical astrology is so comprehensive. There is so much to it. If you told me you had inflammation, I would look for Mars. If you told me you had stomach issues, I might look at Virgo or Mercury and see what's happening with that sign and that planet. So there's a lot of things you can know, but like I said, there is so much, and I want to go through as much as I can with you guys today. So let's go to Capricorn and Saturn. Saturn in Capricorn is the sign and planet of longevity, which is really interesting because Capricorn can be the Benjamin Buttons of the zodiac. That's an old movie that came out where a man aged backwards. He actually started out old, and I think it was Brad Pitt, and he became younger. So a lot of times Capricorns might seem like really old souls or very old children, but they seem to get younger as they get old younger as they get older, which is one of the joys of Capricorn and being ruled by Saturn. Being a Capricorn, having planets in Capricorn can be a little tough at times because, again, it's a little like Virgo. You can be a bit hard on yourself and a bit overly ambitious, a lot of things. But what does Capricorn rule exactly? Orthopedic issues like osteoarthritis, the knees, the joints, the skeletal system, the teeth, our structure. This rules our joint conditions, dental issues, skeletal diseases in general, the bones. If you have arthritis, this could be a Saturn or Capricorn issue. Those are all some of the things that go along with the sign of Capricorn. And then Saturn, our planet of restriction. What does it rule? Well, it rules our bones, joints, teeth, our endurance. And it also rules chronic health issues. So if you have something, and again, like rheumatoid arthritis, psoriatic arthritis, those kinds of diseases would be chronic issues that are a bit hard to deal with, although our medical world has come a long way these days. But these are things that could be chronic or ongoing. That would be under Saturn's category. And as I said before, I wouldn't necessarily say Saturn rules weight loss, but I do think when Saturn's in your corner, the first or sixth house, again, it's probably easier to lose weight if that's what you're trying to do. So if you have a stellium in Capricorn, you might really want to take extra care of your joints, your bones, and your teeth for sure. And when Pluto was going through Capricorn, I don't think I was the only one that had some issues with my teeth. And Uranus in my sixth house didn't help, but I think that was an ongoing thing when Pluto was in Capricorn. So, all very interesting. So, let's move on to Aquarius, ruled by Uranus and also by Saturn, was the ancient ruler. But Uranus is the sudden, the unexpected. This is when things happen that you're like, what? The unpredictable, it rules seizures, panic attacks, meltdowns. If you think about your child having a meltdown, or even an adult having a meltdown, as they call them, you may want to see if Uranus was involved with that. And this rules stress as well, anxiety, and also is acute conditions, things that happen suddenly, where Capricorn rules those chronic issues and Saturn rules the chronic and the long term. It's like Uranus rules those issues that are acute or come on suddenly. So, what does Aquarius rule exactly? The ankles, the calves, the shins, our circulatory system. Interesting. So this could be varicose veins, swelling of the ankles, like edema in your ankles. Also, anxiety and nervousness in general could be an Aquarius issue, as Uranus is the ruler. So you would look if you're having issues with your ankles or your shins, or you're just accident prone. Also, look at that circulatory system if you have a lot of planets in Aquarius, and look and see what Uranus is doing, and somewhat Saturn as well. But truly, I think that's Capricorn's planet, even though the ancient ruler of Aquarius was Saturn. And before I finish with Pisces, I just want to say I've told you an awful lot about myself today that I usually don't say a whole lot. But one thing I learned through everything that I was going through, I always knew that we're all connected as a universe. This is my personal belief, that we're all part of this universe and connected together somehow. So now every time someone's name comes up for me, if I see it in an email or I'm searching for something, or it just comes to my head or I feel it in my heart, I always send out positive energy to that person, just say a quick prayer for them. And I don't know, maybe if we all did that when we thought about somebody and sent that positive energy, it would help. I don't know, maybe that's wishful thinking on my part, but I think that kind of goes along with Pisces, the planet of the sign of world peace. So let's get into a Pisces, and the rulers. Jupiter was the ancient ruler and the current ruler, Neptune. So Pisces, so we're all the way at the bottom now. And Pisces actually rules the feet, the toes, and our lymphatic system. And also, Pisces does have some to do with our immune system as well. Pisces, a water sign, it could rule swelling, have something to do with edema, especially around the feet. Maybe gout could be one of those conditions. And Neptune, as we move into Neptune a little bit, this rules some things that we can't explain, like when there's conditions that just can't be diagnosed. We might want to look at Neptune and see what's going on there. Neptune is the planet of no boundaries. And I think it's really interesting the things that Neptune rules. As I said, it rules those mystery diseases. That's when we want to look at Pisces or at Neptune, the unexpected, unusual, unpredictable. Now, I know that seems like it might be under Uranus's category, but actually it's Neptune's category as well. Also, poison. Isn't that interesting? Infection. Neptune also rules gases. So poison really comes under Neptune's domain, as well as pharmaceuticals. So if you are having a transit of Neptune through your sixth house, you might be really careful about prescriptions you take or what herb supplements you take. And just be careful about those things that you put into your body, and also addictions. You might want to look at Pisces for addictions or mental health issues, and on Neptune for that as well. Again, back to the lymph system and our immune system for Pisces and for Neptune. Neptune is so innocuous. It's like you may not really know what's going on when Neptune's involved. So it almost seems a little bit more serious, doesn't it? Because it's really that unknown domain in the medical world, I would think. I hope everybody has enjoyed this. And just remember that there is no substitute for your doctor or your medical caregiver or even your own intuition. Medical astrology can just give you a glimpse at what's happening or what might happen, or where you might have weak conditions, weaknesses, or strengths in your natal chart when it comes to your health. It's Connie Joe with Soul Navigation. I hope you enjoyed it. Bye from Florida.